Hello everyone. Welcome to lesson number 2. Today we are doing conventions in Minecraft modding, registries, assets, items, and a bonus lesson on Sidedness that I threw together last minute. So most of what we're going to do today is messing around with items. So if you don't have a project set up already, I would recommend reviewing the slides from the first lesson. There's a bunch of links in there, download that stuff, and I'm sure somebody who was here yesterday can help you. So I would recommend doing that during my presentation because we're going to have some demos where everyone gets to make their own little thing. You can also steal code from other people, so please do that. If you don't have it set up, download the JDK, IntelliJ, and a mod development kit from NeoForge. Okay, so in case you don't know me, I'm Kat. I am a 4th year cybersecurity student. I've been modding since I was 12. I stopped doing it recently, but I'm getting back into it, and I love Minecraft modding. If you have any questions, you can always ask me outside of this. So, question.
What's the difference between plugins?
Plugins run on the server, the physical server, which we'll get to in our fun Sidedness lesson. They don't have any capability of rendering things or displaying things that aren't already within the client, and they don't run on the client at all. So mods can do more stuff that involves like rendering and input and stuff that runs that you see. So that's the big difference. And also they can't like run on the logical client, which makes it's I don't know. Usually they can only use stuff that a dedicated server has. And also, plugins don't run on the client, so they don't, like, they can't change the client's behavior. What's up?
So question, do we use Forge or Fabric?
We're using NeoForge, which is Forge 2, basically. But I include a lot of Fabric stuff in the lesson, so you can do whatever you want. If you want to do Fabric, go for it. It's just the demos, like, generally focus on NeoForge. The lessons themselves are pretty agnostic. Okay, so conventions, naming conventions. I just want to make sure you guys get started off on the right foot, so we're going to go through some naming conventions. Mod IDs. You guys all picked a mod ID last time, but so when you make a mod, your mod ID has a couple conventions it needs to conform to. They're lowercase, snake case, typically, which is, you can see what snake case looks like there. They usually match the name of your mod, and they should be globally unique, which means no other mod should have the same mod ID. So they should be pretty descriptive usually. So like a common example is there was a mod called AE2 Editions that was applied Energistics 2, and there's also Aether Editions. They both chose the mod ID of AE Editions. So don't do that. So if it's generic, it should have more context. And alternatively to snake case, you can just mash words together. Like, this is my favorite way to do it, actually. It's up to you. Class naming. This is more of a Java thing. In Java, all classes are Pascal case. You can technically do not Pascal case, but please don't. And Pascal case looks like that. Every word has a capital at the start. Most content classes, or like just things in Minecraft, follow the convention of name and then type. So, for example, axe item, furnace block, pig entity. Minecraft actually just calls them pig, but for entities, but don't do that.
Lightly weathered copper stairs.
Well, you don't actually write that out because that's just an instance of block technically, but package names and Maven groups. So most mods follow this most Java programs actually follow this convention for package names. So the first part will always contain a valid domain or unique name. Most people do domains, so if you own a domain, it's a good place to put it in there. So I own itsmeow.dev, so I use dev.itsmeow. Same thing, so like net.minecraftforge, that's a real website. You can go to minecraftforge.net. And if you don't own a domain, you can just put a unique name, so that's what I did. I used to have its_meow as my base package name. If you also don't own a domain, but you own a GitHub account, you can use your GitHub Pages domain, which is technically unique to you. So that's io.github.yourgithub name. And then after that, you will put your project name, which is usually your mod ID. So dev.itsmeow.betteranimals+ is the base package for my mod Better Animals Plus. And that unique set of packages is your Maven group, which is a thing described in your Gradle.properties. And everything in your mod should be inside of that package. So moving on from conventions to registries. This is how you get stuff in the game. So a registry is a list that associates resource locations to content instances or registry objects. So basically, they associate IDs with content and things that do stuff. So why registries? So the game has a central directory of content, and it makes it much easier for the game to save and load things, sync data, list all the content of a certain type, like all the items and all the blocks. And it also ensures that the content IDs are unique. So it associates IDs with things. So Minecraft stores all of its registries in the classes built-in registries and registries. So you can look through them there. Those are at least the standard registry APIs. There's some other ones that are a little weird, but those are the standard ones. So modding APIs facilitate your adding to these registries, and sometimes they wrap them in their own APIs and handlers. And mods can also create custom registries. So like, for example, Mechanism, if you use that, they have a registry for chemicals, and you can register chemicals there. So here are some examples of registries that exist in Minecraft. So any of these things, if you wanted to add them, you need to register them. So there's a lot of things, but blocks, items, entities are the most common ones. Block entities, biomes, structures. So internal registries and things that aren't registries. Game mechanics that seem like they would be registries aren't registries because they store extra data associated with it. So compostable items have a chance of composting. That cannot be in a registry because that has additional data. Furnace fuels store the duration of their fuels. So it would make sense for that to be a registry, but it's not a standard registry API. Entity attributes are their own thing outside of entities themselves. And sometimes things that are basically just Boolean tags don't use registries. They use actual tags, which are a data feature in Minecraft. I haven't really talked about them, but tags, you can associate things. They replace, if you're familiar at all with Forge's OR dictionary, that's what tags are. They're a way of tagging items as being a certain thing. So like stone, for example, would have a tag for different types of stone. So like stone brick would be under the stone tag. The actual stone block would be under the stone tag. And that's how recipes can have like multiple items correspond. And some behavior is actually tied to the things like registry object or content instance or instance to class. There's a lot of ways I've been describing it. But so like foodness, that's an actual behavior that's tied to things. There's no registry for being a food. So compostables and fuel are like an example of special registries that are implemented like within Minecraft's code but don't use the registry system. And those things are also provided by modding APIs. So I've included an example for Fabric and Forge. Those are links to their documentation on those. So the registration lifecycle. Registration is usually controlled by the modding API. It tells you when to register things. It gives you the APIs to register things. It varies because Fabric is a little lighter on that. So Fabric does registration statically, meaning you can basically do it at any time before the registries freeze. And it's just going to be there. You can also, Fabric also, you can do it during like the mod loading event. You can do it anytime before they freeze, which is anytime during initialization. NeoForge and Forge provide actual events which basically enforce when you're supposed to register things. Or they also give you deferred registers, which will do the registration at the right time. But you tell it how to register things, and it does it at the right time. And Forge, the old one, prevents registration with vanilla stuff, so you can't actually use Minecraft's like built-in registries or registries classes. But NeoForge apparently does not do this, is what I've learned recently. So here's some examples of registry events, which are basically considered like manual registration. So for NeoForge, you make a handler for the register event, and then if you remember the events from the last lesson, so you register the event, and then that event describes how to register things, and then Forge will actually register it at the right time. So, and then in Fabric, you can do it during the oninitialize, or basically anywhere you can put registry.register, blah, 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 blah. But you can also put it inside static fields. So static fields initialize when the class loads, which I will also briefly go into class loading a little later in this lesson. But so basically, as soon as the class is like loaded by the JVM, it executes all static initializers, which are when you have a static field and there's an equals sign, you're assigning something to it. That's called a static initializer. So that will immediately register it, and your Minecraft mod will load basically at the correct time for registration before registries freeze. So this one's a little more standard, storing it inside a static field like that, because you can reference it within your mod. So like, for example, yesterday during our lesson, we checked if we were holding a stick, right? So we did stack.getItem equals items.stick. So having a static field allows us to do those comparisons, because then we can do, is our item equal to this test block? So it's useful to have those things stored somewhere, because otherwise you'd have to search the registry for it. So deferred registers are the preferred way in most Minecraft mods, especially with NeoForge mods, to register things. So they wrap the events in a big fancy API, which basically does the same thing as the static initializers that I showed, except it holds it and then registers it later instead of doing it immediately. So for what it actually looks like, I'm going to do a demo in a second here. But they are statically accessible, and it handles registering at the right time for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Fabric does not have deferred registers, so most people do the static thing there. And you have to register them to the mod event bus. That's the main thing with deferred registers. So registration demo. I am now going to demonstrate the registration process. So if you want to open up your example projects from last time, you can follow along. So as with all things, I did not prepare anything specific. So we're going to go to the NeoForge documentation, which is going to tell us how to register things, because that is how you learn in Minecraft modding, which is you figure it out yourself. So let's see, registries. Here's registries. So deferred register, here we are. So you create a deferred register, and I'm just literally going to copy this into my mod and paste it up here because this is a static field and it's not imported, so I'm going to hit Alt-Enter to import all the stuff that I need. Oh, it's really not happy about that. So yes, in most mods, what people do is they do something like this. They go mod blocks, and then you put all your stuff in here, so like all your block registrations. It makes things like more neat, but you can also, if you have a really small mod, you can put it in the main class. So I'm gonna put it in here, because why not? So here is our deferred register. I'm actually going to do items because we are doing items today. So just change all this to item. Pretty simple. So, and then and then you can literally just start defining stuff to register to this statically. So you make static final fields of the type of the thing that you're registering. Actually, yeah. So then I have item, and then we're going to do it test item equals. Actually, no, we're going to name it exploding stick. All right, extending on the last lesson, we're just going to make our own item that does exploding stick stuff. So then we made this deferred register. So that deferred register is what wraps all the registry events and passes, like lets us interface with the API. So we are referencing that, which is named items, but it can be named literally anything. I can name this hello. But yeah. So items dot, and it has the register method, which accepts a name. So it automatically associates everything with our mod ID because we gave our mod ID to it. So I'm going to name this exploding underscore stick. So that means that the ID of our item is going to be catmod exploding underscore stick. That's the full ID. And so then the next argument is the actual thing that we're registering. So then I can do new item. Actually, though, this isn't correct because what deferred registers do is they give you give it how to register or how to create the thing to then register later. So you don't actually create the item statically. That can lead to some problems. So what we're actually doing is we're making a lambda, which I put in my Java concepts, but lambdas are basically a way of passing a method inline to another thing. So we're creating a method that describes how to create the item. So this means it has no arguments and it returns an item. And then the item here, it needs an item properties. So I'm just going to give it an empty one. And so you'll see that the type of the result of the items.register method is not actually an item. It's a deferred holder for an item. So we can just change this type here to deferred holder item. I think it's actually deferred holder item. So that is our final code. So theoretically, this looks like it's going to register, but we haven't actually registered the deferred register. We have to give the deferred register the correct event bus events to actually perform registration. Right now, it's just sitting on its own in a class and does nothing. This would never load. There's nothing that references it, so it would never load. The only thing that's loading is our cat mod here. So what we actually need to do is do mod event bus dot add listener, and then we do mod blocks dot items. I don't know. I need to rename this from mod blocks actually. I swear I'm not sick anymore, guys. Not this week. So I did that wrong. Hold on. This is why we read the documentation. Ah, okay. That makes more sense. It's the other way around. There we go. So this is the correct way. And now our items deferred register will receive the registry events and then register anything that is registered to it. So the flow of things here is the event bus is given to the deferred register. The deferred register has a mod ID and then what actual registry it's supposed to register to, as well as the events now. And then you register stuff to this deferred register, which describes how to create instances of stuff. And then when it's time for the registry event to actually occur, the deferred register takes all your things that you gave to it to register later. It actually constructs them, so it runs all these little lambdas here, and then puts them inside the registry that you specified right here. And then this actual variable here will then be populated with a reference to the item that you created. So then later, if I wanted to change this from stick to exploding stick, I can do mod items dot exploding stick dot get, because you're not actually getting the item. You have to you have to get it from the deferred holder. So it's like a supplier, if you're familiar with the type supplier, which was also in my Java concepts review. So now we should theoretically be able to boot up the game and have a exploding stick item that explodes because we removed it from the old stick and put it on the new stick. So let's try it. Can I go back to the mod items? Yeah.
Can you explain this again, like the deferred holder thing? Because I didn't understand why we have 2 items inside.
So that's a generic type. It basically says, so things can hold different types, and a generic type is a templating system where you can give it different types to hold on to, basically. So this is just an extension of the deferred holder type that specifically holds item types. I don't know if I would just get comfortable with Java generics if you're not like familiar with the concept. So, I mean, if you've used a hash map before, they always look like this, hash map of string to like something like item, right? Those are the two types that are associated with this hash map. It's a map of strings to items. In the same way, this deferred holder is a deferred holder that holds items. So anyways, my game has booted up. So let's load in. So now my stick is not exploding. So sad. And our exploding stick probably won't be in here because we didn't register it to any creative tabs. But we can use /give to get it from. And you'll see it has no texture. It's just an error. But if I use it, it's now exploding, and it's sending the text that I put in there. So, and it also doesn't have a name. And this lesson will go into all of these things. We're going to make this a real item. Although I didn't actually put anything on creative tabs. I just heard the metal pipe sound.
I still have the metal pipe.
Yeah. Yeah, they made a metal pipe. That's great. I need my fans to chill out so I don't ruin the recording. So I'm actually going to remove this message because it's really annoying, but anyway, back to my presentation. You guys can feel free to fiddle around with the items. But we're going to talk about assets. So, I'm going to review the concept of resource locations, which I did last time. But resource locations are a system used to reference paths in Minecraft. They all have a namespace or domain. For vanilla Minecraft, it's just Minecraft, but mods, it's your mod ID. So when I spawned the item in, I spawned catmod : exploding stick, right? The domain of that is catmod. That's technically a resource location. So all resource locations have a path alongside their namespace, and the path is relative depending on what's using it. So like an item, like I didn't have to specify that this is an item resource location, I just spawned it. So it depends on what's actually consuming the resource location, how much path you need to put there. But like, yeah, so recipes, if you want to reference another recipe from a recipe, you don't put recipe / as part of its path, but it really depends on what uses it. And all resource locations are namespace and then a colon and then the path. So the structure of folders within the assets folder, which you should notice in your project you have an assets folder. It's in source, main, resources, and then assets. So assets store all the associated like client-side content within your mod. So each subfolder within the assets folder, at least in your mod, will correspond to the namespace of any resource location. So like if you wanted to add stuff for your mod, you would put it in a subfolder with your mod ID. And you can actually customize other mods and even Minecraft's namespaces by just putting them in there. It depends on some, like there's a lot of overriding rules. So some have like a replace tag within them, whether it will replace Minecraft or add to it. But you can actually, it's essentially the same thing as a resource pack, if you've ever made a resource pack. So the subfolders of the assets namespaces are textures, models, sounds, block states, lang, which is like localization language, and particles. And those are the most used ones. There's a few other ones like shaders and stuff that are less used. So there's this is the standard folder structure, and all things would follow this. And then here are assets that are used, or formats that are used for assets in Minecraft. So all audio uses ogg vorbis files, and they should usually be mono ogg vorbis files, otherwise things get weird. Textures use PNG files. And 3D models use Minecraft JSON model format, which is specialized to the game. They limit the certain angles and shapes you can use to kind of enforce the art style, but it's voxel based, which means everything's squares instead of triangles like most 3D models. And there's editors like Blockbench that can export this format. And mods can also use Wavefront OBJ 3D models. So if you've ever used the modular power armor mod or advanced rocketry, they have stuff that's not voxels. And that's because they use the OBJ loader, which NeoForge has. So actually, I'm going to show off Blockbench later, but if you want to download Blockbench, go for it. I posted the link to this presentation in the Discord. So model JSONs. For items, the name of the file matches the namespace of the ID in the registered item. So you would actually create a file at models/items/youritemid.json. And for blocks, this actually varies. So you make a block state definition, which describes all the different states the block can be in. And each state can have a different model. So you actually get to write the name of the model associated with the block. So you can see the folder structure there. Although the block one isn't entirely true because you'll have block states. I don't know why I put that there. So model JSONs provide the shape and texture of items and blocks. And so texture, yes, texture. So you have to actually specify which texture to use inside your model JSON. And they inherit attributes from a designated parent model. So that's what most Minecraft item models just inherit from the generated one, because most of them are just flat 2D textures. So they inherit their attributes. And you bind textures to layers, and then you bind layers to shapes, which form actual surfaces. Texturing. I'm not a visual artist, and pixel art is complicated. So if you want to make cool pixel art and textures for Minecraft, I suggest you look elsewhere and practice a lot. So popular pixel art programs are Paint.net or .pdn, which is free. I'm personally, that's what I use. Sprite, which is $20, but you can also try compiling the C source for free. And Photoshop, which costs Adobe. We don't buy Photoshop around here.
Does the school get that?
I think they do in the virtual computer labs. Yeah, maybe. I don't know about the legal standards of using the school Photoshop for personal use, but we'll see. So most Minecraft art is 16 by 16 or operates at an equivalent scale. So they increase the size of the actual PNG to add more canvas, but most of the actual textures are 16 by 16 chunks essentially. So if you want to make stuff that looks like Minecraft, it should be 16 by 16. So now we're going to add a model and texture to our exploding stick. So best way, I'm actually going to close this real quick so I can. So first I'm going to make a texture, which I'm going to be using Paint.net for. Hooray! So I'm going to resize this canvas to 16 by 16, and we're going to make an exploding stick. So all Minecraft textures have transparent backgrounds. So here we go, guys. I'm a pro texturer. You're really not going to get any better than this. What color should our stick be? I'm going to do a deep blue. All right, guys. Here it goes. It's going to be like a little wand, I think. And then we're going to put a red orb on the end. Okay, and then we're going to put a slightly lighter color in the middle. And we're going to make it shine, guys. You know what? I don't want to hear it.
How do you do how the bow has stages to it?
Yeah. So that uses MC meta animations. The bows are really complicated, actually. Really bad example. Okay, this looks a little more like a wand, right? Yeah. So now I'm going to save this into here.
I feel like you're going beyond stick. It's very impressive.
So I actually deleted my resources folder, my bad.
No, because the PC's gonna possibly come and destroy my
We're really pushing my limits here. So it goes in source, main, resources, assets, mod ID, textures, and then finally item, or items, or item. I always forget. I think it's items. Hold on. I put it in my presentation. So it's item. It's item, not items.
Why does it have to be so specific?
Because that is where it looks for them.
Okay.
That's how they coded it. So, all right. So I put it in item. You can technically name the PNG anything, but I'm going to name it exploding underscore stick because that's what makes sense to me. Cool. I've made an exploding stick PNG and I have saved it in the correct location. So now if I go in IntelliJ, I can actually reload this from disk. Or I think I did it wrong because that's not right. Where are my assets? Hold on. Oh, see, I actually used the wrong mod. I used the other one, so I saved it to the wrong folder. So I'm just going to copy this, put it in the right one. Boom. Okay, now it's in the right place. So now you can see my PNG is in here. It's looking great. So now we need to make a model because the model is what provides the texture and shape to things. And that's what Minecraft is actually looking for when it gives us the error checkers. You can actually see in the run log, actually, when you run the game and it loads and doesn't find a texture for something, it will say so. Unable to load model catmod item/exploding stick, right? Referenced from exploding stick, file not found. So I actually need to create this file for it to be happy with me. So it's both. So the model JSON definition includes different ways, like variants. It's a complicated system, but it's both. The model JSON provides both for items.
Also in hand and
yeah, in hand and in like. So it's in your inventory, in your hand in first person, and then also two other players in third person. So those are the three like poses or like different locations they can be, and you can actually translate the model to different like locations based on each of those.
when you switch it to offhand.
Yeah. So I'm going to show Blockbench in a second here. If you create a Blockbench model for an item, it will let you like edit that sort of stuff. So hold on. So if I add a cube here, there we go. Then you can, I believe, edit the poses in the display tab, right? And so I can put the cube in different locations. And so this all corresponds to like different, so if I export this, yeah, I'm not actually using this model because it's an example and it's not going to do what I want. But I've just exported it. And let me open this with VS Code. So this is what it actually looks like. You have the elements, which describes different cubes, and it has all the faces, and each face is given a texture, which corresponds to a layer, and each layer has an actual PNG tied to it. And then this display thing lets you translate scale based on the poses.
And the fourth word there for the like up, down, west, what's that one? Like the
UV.
like it will be X, Y, Z, and what's
So yeah, this is X, Y, Z.
and like there's about 4.
There's 4.
Yeah. Like
These are UV coordinates. So UV coordinates tie textures to faces. It's a general like game engine concept, but if you have like,
Oh, like front end.
so you can put sections of a texture so it like wraps around things. It's complicated. It's a complicated topic. I can't really describe it in an easy way, but here's the thing: for most models, you actually don't. Since this is just a 2D texture, we don't need that. We don't need to make a 3D one. So that's if you wanted to make a 3D item. But I'm not doing that currently. I'm making a JSON file. So we're going to do exploding_stick.json. But this needs to go in the item folder. My bad. And then we put it in there. So the name of this file, the model, will always correspond to the actual item's ID. So it's looking in item/exploding stick within the models folder. And then we just make our model definition, which could be the thing I just exported from Blockbench, but most models actually look like this. They just go parent generated. So that lets Minecraft generate the actual model part of it. So like the pose, how it looks in your hand, and how it looks in your inventory. So it gives it the right like actual, for most items, because every item almost like displays the same. It's a 2D texture, you hold it. The only difference comes for things like axes and tools, where you'll hold them in your hand a little differently. So instead of facing you, it faces ahead. So there's an actual like there's a handheld model, so you can use that one too for things that are handheld. But most are generated, and then we do. Hold on. If we go on the Minecraft wiki and then we look at model JSON, or just model, it will give us the specification for how these things look. So they have a parent, they have display, textures is what I'm looking for. So textures. And then, let's see, defines a texture variable. Item models, textures. So most textures just use layer 0 as the default one. So it goes layer 0. And then you put the actual paths to the texture, which in our case is catmod : item/exploding_stick.png, I believe. Although I'm not sure about that, so I'm just going to go look at one of my mods. That's how I do things. You can look at, I steal shit from other mods all the time. Not actually steal. I remember how to do things from other mods all the time. So if I just look at literally any item in my mod, oh look, it looks like this. So I'm just gonna, that's literally exactly what I wanted. So this is how it looks. So that is our model definition, which literally just gives it a texture and uses the default Minecraft one. So now the game has a model JSON, we have a texture for it. So if I were to boot up the game right now, it should theoretically have a texture. It didn't work. The texture didn't work because you'll see now it looks different in my hand. It looks like a normal item. Like if I'm just holding a piece of redstone, it has the same like look. But you'll also notice that if I hold an axe or something, it like poses differently, especially in third person. So the 2D texture is shown differently. Anyway, didn't find the texture, so that's not great. It will probably put an error in here when it actually fails to load that. Missing textures. Exploding stick inventory. Is that true? That doesn't seem right. Okay, so here's the fun thing about doing texture stuff. You can just like, you can edit it and then hit F3T and it will reload. And you don't have to actually start the game over again. Didn't work. This is so sad. So, even a professional like me will be so mistaken. There's no reason this doesn't work. Oh. Oh, it's because I put .png. Hold on, I just realized. So in my old version, I had this PNG here. You're not supposed to do that. So now if I reload, hopefully, sometimes the actual like files, so the IDE won't actually update the files in its internal cache. So it's not actually using the actual files off the file system. It loads them into its build folder first and then does stuff. So it didn't update in there, so I'm rebuilding it. Yeah, so normally you could just F3T, but because the IDE is a little silly, yeah, guys, phone's on silent. This is a movie theater. Just kidding. Anyway, look, exploding stick, guys. We did it.
Let's see if there's
Hey, drop it.
So it looks stupid because it's supposed to be handheld. Yeah, so so we actually want this to be handheld because it's like a wand. I mean, if you hold the actual stick, I think it looks. The stick is also, yeah, the actual stick is handheld. So we're gonna change this. And we're gonna restart the game. And then it's gonna look correct. All right, so now if I go in third person, oh look, it looks like an actual exploding wand stick thing. Just make it longer? I can't. Yeah, I would have to actually make a 3D model for that.
You know the big sword from what's it called? Crazy Craft? How do they do that?
That's a 3D model. So you would do it through Blockbench, and then you would set that as your like actual item model instead of your like using the generated one. So like, yeah, you can have like things that have 3D models as their actual like items. So for example, this is technically an item and it has a 3D model. Now this is an item block, which is like a special type of item that corresponds to a block. But each block actually has an item registered associated with it. What's up?
I think the Trident has like a.
The Trident does, yes. The Trident is a great example.
Isn't the Trident longer?
So you'll notice,
Yeah, use the Trident longer. Can't you?
I could inherit from the Trident. So if I do something like this, although I don't know if that's the actual model used by the Trident, it depends. But I could use the, but it wouldn't have any of the special animations and stuff associated with the Trident.
It's just not me long.
Maybe. It depends. It's,
Yeah, anything for sure. And like the shield when you like right click it. And it
the
goes-
shield also, yes, is a good example. There's lots of, so yeah, if you want to accomplish things, usually you can just steal it from Minecraft. So yeah, now my exploding stick looks like a Trident, but not in third person because the Trident's item model is much different. So yeah, I think the Trident actually uses a different system. You can actually render item stacks. So items can actually use dynamic rendering, which is the same system that like entities use in like other like boats. So like you can use that system to render items. It's just kind of complicated. Some of the modding APIs provide tools. That's called a, they used to be called tile entity stack renderers, but now they're called item or block entity without level renderers, which is BEWLR. So you can actually read up on NeoForge BEWLR. Yeah, block entity without level renderer. So this lets you render fancy stuff for items. But we just use the JSON ones. Anyway, now I'm going to continue the presentation because we added a texture to our thing. Sure, questions. Let's go. How would you add it to a creative tab? I use /give, but you can add it to creative tabs. I haven't like gone over that. I use /give, the command. /give, and then your name, and then the ID of the item.
And then next is can you post the texture into
You want my texture?
And then what did you use?
I use paint.net. So there's a link inside the presentation to that. It's you get it right here. Yeah. I don't think that's the right link. I don't know why it linked there.
What is dot?
It's the same thing, paint.net. They're different names for the same thing. You actually go to getpaint.net to download it. I don't know why my link on the presentation is wrong. Yeah. There we go. That's the correct link. Sorry. Alrighty. Moving on. Language/localization. So you'll notice that our item didn't have a name. It was just showing as item.catmod.explodingstick, which is not a great name. We just want it to say exploding stick, right? So all text in Minecraft can be localized to literally any language. You can go to the language menu and change your language. And so in order to display things in the game as actual text in a language, you always have to go through the localization system, which means you make a localization key or a lang key, and that corresponds to a specific bit of text in the game. And then you go into the actual language definition file and add what that key corresponds to in your language. So you have to do that for English to get things to display properly. You can sometimes do, so like for messages and stuff, like last time when we were sending a message to the player, we used component.literal, so that sends an actual bit of text. Most like actual things within the game would actually send localization keys, and then the client would translate it locally to their language. So there's also several fun English languages that you can add support for if you want to for the sillies, but the main one is en_us.json. They all go inside the lang folder, inside your assets folder, and then you just add different keys, and then those correspond to actual text. I'll show you because I'm going to add one to ours, but you can also add lolcat, which is Icon has cheeseburger. You can all the text is like that. You can actually go change your Minecraft language to that right now if you want. There's also pirate speak, which everything is like, yeah, cracker maybe. Upside down English, which is literally just upside down. I think it automatically generates that one. I'm not sure. And then Shakespearean English, which is all fancy. But yeah. So now we're going to add a lang entry for our item. See the folder? That's lang. And then you create en_us.json. So that's for US English, and then you make a JSON definition, which looks like that, and then you put keys. Can I make one for upside down English? No. So I do item, you do item.yourModID.the item ID. I don't know why it's doing this like highlighting right now. That's driving me crazy, but this is literally just the same one that shows up in the game. So if you're like if you're not sure what the lang entry is, it'll show up in the game. What? Translation key not included in default localization file? That doesn't even make any sense. Okay. Anyways, so you put the key and then colon and then whatever you want it to actually say. So I'm going to make it say exploding stick. And now we have done it. That is our language entry for this one item. So now if I were to load the game up, it would actually have a name. Hopefully. And so in other languages, it'll just show as English if you don't add anything. But you can literally just add one for any languages that you want, and it will show up.
Wait, can't you just use the anvil, or does that not work?
What?
To change the name, can't you use an anvil?
An anvil?
Yeah.
What?
No.
No. Well, yes, but
Oh, is that only
the name of the item in the game. So like in a creative tab, when you hover over the name of the item, it'll say like this is a stick, right? And in other languages, it'll say the actual word for stick in that language instead of actually saying stick. Like, look, if I go in here, I can change to English from Foroned Kingdom. This is Shakespearean English, I'm pretty sure, or something. So one player, many player. This is a localization. So you can add an entry for so like it says exploding stick, but the actual game calls it stick, but warped toadstool on a stick, that's not what it's actually called. Yellow red more, that's a carrot on a stick. But if you don't add one, it just uses the English one. So I'm gonna, oh god. Which one is languages? Which one's languages, guys?
I think it's curious.
Cur- Thank you, guys. Okay. Yeah, so now we have it. It's called exploding stick. It's not item.catmod.exploding_stick. So that is language and how Minecraft accomplishes localization. So even these item creative tabs, these names are localized. Like these are all localized. Everything in this game is localized. It is like the most bought game in the entire world, so I'm not really surprised. But you guys want a creative tab, and I didn't put that in our lesson, but we'll do it. So once again, we're going to look at the documentation. I know, crazy concept, right? It's probably in here somewhere. No, we'll just wait. All right. Bum, bum, bum. Here it is. Creative tabs. Custom creative tabs. Or we can add it to an existing one. We'll add it to an existing one because I don't want to deal with it. So an item can be added to via the build creative mode tab contents event. So that's how it works on NeoForge, at least. Which is fired on the mod event bus. Only on the logical. I didn't know that. Okay. Anyway, it's on the mod event bus, which means that we have to subscribe it using So if you'll remember from the last time, this is the mod event bus that we were using, and then this is the game event bus that uses like these annotations. So we're actually gonna not use what it says and do it like this instead, because it wouldn't work otherwise. So what tab should we add it to? Our exploding stick. I'm going to go with tools. Tools and utilities. It's a tool. Anyways, and then we do event.accept. And then see, another reason why having our reference to our item is useful is we can just get it here. And then boom, it's ready. So now we made this event handler. We have to actually add it to the event bus. So we can do mod event bus.add listener, this build contents. This is a method reference. Once again, review lambdas. We're basically passing a method as an argument. So now we have added the exploding stick to the tools and utilities tab. I'm not going to show that off yet because I want to continue with the presentation. Because I have more things. Items. Guys, items. There's so much more you can do with items than I've just shown. So, when we created our item earlier, we had to pass an item properties into the constructor. The item properties are just a bunch of special things that you can tell an item how to work. So, in item properties, you can specify whether it is food. Its maximum stack size, by default, it's 64, but like ender pearls, you can only stack up to 16. Its durability, so tools and stuff, you can make them have durability via item properties. Whether it's resistant to lava or fire, will it burn? So like obsidian, if you throw it in fire, it won't burn. Crafting remainders, so if you actually craft a bucket inside a recipe, like a cake, a milk bucket, you get the bucket back, that's a crafting remainder. And rarity, which is a dungeony thing that makes the name like pink. So your item class, which is the actual item itself when we did new item, the item class controls the functionality of the item. And so if you want to make your own item class, you extend the base item class, and then you can override functions on it. So these are the functions that are most useful within the item class, the base one at least. So you have use, which is called when you right-click on literally anything. There's a whole pipeline there that's good to review. There's use on, which is when you right-click on a block. or I think also entities, maybe. Don't quote me on that. Mine block, which is when you use the item to break a block, and onCrafted by when it's crafted. And then append hover text. You can actually add like text to show up in the box that pops up when you hover over an item. You can put extra text there. And here's the thing. The item class cannot store data. You cannot be like, oh, I'm going to have a counter that's how many times I use the item. If you just put a counter inside your item class, it's going to be shared between every single version of that item. Items cannot store data with the item class itself. I'll explain that more. So items are flyweights, which is sort of like a singleton, but not really. Flyweights means only one instance of the item class exists for a single registered like type of item. So our exploding stick, if we were to have our own like custom exploding stick class, and then we created an instance of that and registered it to catmod::exploding stick, then that one exploding stick that we created, like instance of the class, would be shared between all exploding sticks that exist in the game. So if I were to get an exploding stick and my friend had an exploding stick, they're both using the same item class. But then if I were to register exploding stick 2 using the same exploding stick, like a new instance of the same exploding stick class, those ones would all share their own exploding stick class. So they're not unique, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. This is the same for blocks in Minecraft. Every block shares classes between each registry entry. And so storing data as in fields on an item would mean it was shared between all items. So you could have a shared item right-clicked counter, and then like every single time anyone on the server right-clicked the item, then that counter would go up and everyone would be able to see that. But most people just want to store things, and then it doesn't work, and that's why. So the item class is basically only used for logic and properties. It doesn't handle state at all. And blocks are the same. So then there's ItemStacks. So ItemStacks are a collection of items which is stored in an inventory or slot. This is what is actually holding items. They have a maximum size, which is specified by the type of the item in the stack. So if you have an item stack full of ender pearls, its maximum size is 16 and inherits that from the ender pearl. And they can only contain one type of item, but they can have like multiple of that item. But they all need to have the same like data. So if you have like a sword that has a certain amount of damage on it, so swords have an item stack of size of 1, but if it weren't to have that, you can't stack two swords with different amounts of damage. They have to have exactly the same data. So for the same reason, if you were to like take like a block of dirt and rename it to like Bert or something, you can't stack Bert with normal blocks of dirt because they have different data. But item stacks can store data. Unlike the item classes, item stacks handle the state and logic associated with stacking, having multiple items, transferring, merging, dropping, that sort of thing. Unlike items, which just do when you right-click stuff or like eating, that sort of thing. So now a big concept in Minecraft is NBT. It stands for Named Binary Tag. It is a specialized Minecraft-specific binary data serialization format. What that means is it's a way to store stuff. And that's what Minecraft uses for most of its actual sort of things. So like worlds are encoded as NBT data. So you can actually view NBT using NBT Explorer or NBT Studio. It has a bunch of different types. It's sort of like JSON, but not really, not at all. And you can attach NBT to item stacks via data components, which I'm going to do in the next slide. You may be familiar with NBT from SNBT, which is stringified NBT, which I've shown an example of on the bottom there. You can use it in the summon and give commands to specify like additional data. So everything in Minecraft stores data with NBT. And then you have item data components. So these are a new thing from 120.5. They're extensions to item stacks that let you serialize data to and from them and include that behavior like into an item. So a lot of vanilla systems use this to add like data to items. So enchantments, banner, patterns, color, dye color, repair cost, durability, they all use item data components, which attach data to item stacks. So in older versions, the same thing existed where you would actually be writing NBT data to a stack, but it didn't have like the consistent class format that the data components now use, where you can actually like create specific containerized bits of stuff. And Mojang is moving towards this system. So like there's now components for if something is a tool, if something is food, that's a component. There you can add components that change the durability of items, like just by using /give commands. So now it's a little more modularized. Before that would be actually tied to the item itself. But now they're attachable and they serialized MBT on the item stack. So that was the end of my like normal lesson. I want to demo a little bit of what you can do with items real quick. And then I have a bonus lesson on Sidedness if anybody wants to hear that. So you'll notice that when for our like modded item, we're only using the base item class. You can actually use any subclass of item. So there are things like axe item, which already exist. So we could make our exploding stick an axe. And it would act like an axe. It would break stuff like an axe. But I don't want to do that. I want to make our own item. So how about instead of using this event to like pick up when you right click on something, the exploding stick was actually like it was built into the logic of the exploding stick. So that's what I'm going to do. If I make a package, items, and then I put exploding stick item, and then I can make it extend item, so it inherits all of its attributes and stuff from item. It's a type of item. So right now this is going to be a functional item that I can actually use, but it doesn't have anything on it. So now that is a valid item. It does exactly the same thing as normal items, but it is now an exploding stick item. Additionally, I could do something like this. I can change these to exploding stick item. I think the second one has to be item. So that I can actually, the variable will actually be of the type item. Yeah, that's correct. So now when I do .get on this exploding stick, it'll be of the type exploding stick item instead of just item. So then we want to move this explosion behavior from this event here into the actual item. We can override there's a lot of methods to override, but we're looking for use on because that's when we actually right click on a block. So then we can check the like make sure it's in the main hand. Is that hold on. Interaction hand. So make sure you're using the main hand and then do something. And we also want to make sure we're running on the logical server. So context get level.is client side. Not client side. And then we can just copy paste our exploder code from over here. And then boom, we've done it. We need this though. So, and then we return, we have to return an interaction result, which in this case is a success because, although I think it's a no item used because we just right clicked. So now if I remove this event, now our item will actually do it within the item itself. It's better because Minecraft doesn't have to like trigger the event to, like we don't need to subscribe to the event anymore, so it's less like processing power. It's not much, but it's actually integrated to the item, so it's a little faster. So now our exploding stick, despite not using the event, is still exploding because now it's using its own version of the item class. So look at that. And look, it says tools and utilities, which means I can go here, and there it is.
Is it how do they sort it in the tabs?
It's sorted by the order that it's added.
So not alphabetical?
No, so if you wanted to actually like insert it into like somewhere in a specific spot, you'd have to like override the default tab and then do a bunch of weird stuff. I wouldn't recommend worrying about it. Yeah, normally mods put their own stuff in their own tab. So now we don't even need this event anymore, and I can just remove it because it's not used anymore. Okay. All right, everyone. Sidedness. You guys ready? Sidedness. So sidedness is my favorite thing, guys. I've been talking about this for so long, but I haven't explained it to you. I'm so sorry. This is also not going to go enough in depth as it should, but it's kind of one of those things that you just sort of had to learn by doing. So, multiplayer. Minecraft is a multiplayer game. The server controls the flow of logic and storage and everything associated with the actual game, and it's running, right? The client controls their movements and location in the world, which is why hacked clients exist. So the server enforces the limits on that. Data flows regularly between the client and the server, such as like chunks in their contents, entities, the player's location, inventory, that sort of thing. And Minecraft can also run in single player. And so single player worlds actually run an internal server on the server thread, and then the main thread does all the client-y stuff, like showing what the game looks like. I misspelled connection. I'm so sorry. This thread can be opened for connections of other clients through the Open to LAN button in the main menu, or the pause menu, right? So brief overview of networking in Minecraft. The servers process client information through packets. The packets have directions, so they can go client to server, server to client. And they generally fall into a few categories. Play, which is anything to do with simulating the game. Login, so connecting. Status, making sure you're still connected. And configuration, so when you join a server, it has like resource packs and stuff it can send to you. If you look at this link to the protocol there, that's the Minecraft protocol. You can actually implement a Minecraft server just by matching the packet protocols. So there's actually like I think Hypixel, their servers are written in C. They don't use the Minecraft server. It's crazy. But anyway, so some examples of client to server and server to client packets. Client sends movement updates, interactions, moving items between inventories, your connection status. And then the server sends the client things like block updates, entity spawning, chat messages, movement confirmations or limits, your health, hunger, inventory. So then in mods, we don't, like networking, sure, but we don't care about that. I want you guys to know about logical and physical sidedness. So a logical server is what acts as the controller of the game. It saves data. It doesn't render things, but it could possibly do it. It just doesn't actually render things. So the logical server is where most of your mods code will run. So like because most of mods have to do with doing logic. So an entity that moves and you write some AI for it, that's a logical server thing because the server controls the movement. And then there's the logical client. So the logical client does one or two things, which is interfacing with the game window. So rendering stuff to the screen, displaying things, textures, models, and input. So when you move around, press WASD. Language too is one thing. So all that is associated with the logical client. And all of the logical client code is located in net.minecraft.client. Anything that's client specific. So a physical server is the Minecraft dedicated server, which is a separate jar that you can download and run it, and it doesn't have any of the display capabilities of the actual game. It can only run a server, and it can only accept connections on that server. There's stripped down versions of the full game and remove literally anything related to rendering or input. So it basically deletes the net.minecraft.client package. You build that, you have a logical server, or physical server. There's a small amount of code that's physical server only, which is used for that little white GUI, if any of you have ever ran a Minecraft server. And so physical servers are never, ever, ever logical clients. They are always logical servers. A physical client is the regular Minecraft game that you have played. You open it up on your computer. It has single player, multiplayer, that sort of thing. They're always logical clients, which is the game window itself, and the rendering and the input. But sometimes they are also logical servers. So when you are connected to a actual dedicated server, or you're connected to a server over LAN, you don't have a logical server running, but when you start a single player game or you open to LAN with that single player game, you are running an integrated server, which is a logical server. And the game communicates between those two threads. So one thread runs the logical server, one runs the logical client. They communicate between those two threads, basically using the packets, the same packets that I described in networking, but it doesn't actually use like a socket or anything like that. But they have to communicate with each other. So a little example of this if you're confused. So first example, you have a dedicated server. That is running a logical server. You have a client connected to that that is running a logical client and sends packets to the dedicated logical server. Second example, you have a client. It is running a logical server, and they open to LAN. And it's also running a logical client for the person who's hosting it. And then another client can connect to that, and it's just running a logical client and then receiving and sending packets to the other client's logical server. So, and then you can just play single player, and that is on a physical client. You play single player, it's running a logical server and a client at the same time. So a little bit on physical sidedness within Minecraft mods. So physical servers, as in the Minecraft dedicated server, cannot reference any client code, anything related to rendering or input, because it actually deletes it. It doesn't exist on the server. There is no code to display things on the Minecraft dedicated server. So if you write a mod that references any client-only code, anything in net.minecraft.client, inside like a shared thing that runs on the dedicated server, the JVM will get very upset with you and start throwing ClassNotFoundExceptions and NoClassDefined errors. So you have to avoid class loading, which is a fun, archaic JVM concept in which it lists out all the things that are connected to the current class and then loads them in advance so it can actually execute stuff. And so if you load something that doesn't exist, it gets very pissy. So therefore, shared classes should never reference any client-only code directly. You have to do a bunch of hacks to get around it, or it will trigger class loading and crash the dedicated server. So your actual, like, when you're testing the mod, if you don't test it on a dedicated server, you can run into issues where it doesn't run on the dedicated server because you reference client-only code. So that's physical sides, specifically for physical sides. So physical side, which is the actual dedicated server and dedicated client. The physical sidedness in practice, so client-side methods inside net.minecraft.client are rendering textures, language, input events. And so mixing references is typically a big no-no. You can reference shared code inside the client code, but you cannot reference client code inside shared code, or things will break. And most loaders actually allow you to make separate entry points for client-only stuff, so you can keep all of it isolated in its own package. Forge has the fml environment.dist variable, or field, which stores the current physical side, so if you wanted to check it, you could do it like that. And you'll also see annotations like environment or only in. That just means that the following method, field, or class just doesn't exist on the server. So the only in, I think, is a better example of what that means. Dist is short for distribution, so distributed client, distributed server. So you don't actually really check physical side very often because you should theoretically have your code separate anyway. There's a couple of reasons why you might not. It depends. Once again, you kind of have to learn these things. It's just to learn by doing. Logical sidedness. So when you write shared code, event handlers and stuff, sometimes it runs on both the logical client and the logical server. So like that right-click event that we just wrote, right? For the item, the like override of that useOn method, that method runs on the logical client and the logical server. So the server will process it and then send any results to the client, and the client already right-clicked it on itself, so it will also run that method and do any processing. So you have to be a little bit careful when you do stuff like that. So in my version, I checked if we were on the logical server by doing not event, so if you look at my code here, I check not context.getLevel.isClientSide. So this ensures that we're running on the logical server because I actually don't want to explode on the logical client because it could cause conflicts. The client might explode differently than the server did. So I want the server to take control there. So I run it on the server. So that's how I checked. So the logical client is still like technically separate from the logical server, like from a threading standpoint. So you can't just write like a variable. If you made a field and then you accessed it on two different threads at the same time, it could break. So, and also it would act differently if you were using a dedicated server versus the internal server. So you can't like, just be careful not to access two things on different logical client sides. And it's confusing because yes, it is the same actual blocks of code. They're just getting run by two different things. So in practice, logical sidedness, If something's running on both, you can just check the logical side. That's through level.isClientSide usually. Most game behavior actually takes place on the logical server, like I said, because it's like authoritative. It's what actually decides what happens. And the logical client will basically only do input GUI rendering, so you shouldn't have to worry about that otherwise. And that is my presentation on Sidedness. I know it's kind of complicated. Any questions about Sidedness? Cool. That is everything that I made for my presentations. If anybody wants to do cool like mod stuff, any questions on what's up?
Mine's not working.
It's not working. Okay, in a second. If anyone wants to know how any like modding concepts work, open book. But I'm going to close the presentation. I could probably end the recording too.